The courtroom felt unusually calm, not the heavy silence of grief or confrontation, but the quiet that settles in when one side believes the outcome is already decided. Adam Collins sat at the polished wooden table, with an ease that felt almost inappropriate for the moment. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his posture relaxed, his expression faintly amused. To him, this divorce hearing was nothing more than an inconvenience, a final formality standing between him and the rest of his life. The divorce papers lay neatly stacked in front of him. A pen rested on top, waiting. Adam glanced at the documents and smirked. He had signed contracts worth millions without a second thought. Compared to those, this was nothing. Just another signature, another loose end tied up. Across the room stood Emily Collins, his wife, at least for a few more minutes. She looked simple, almost painfully so. A plain dress, no jewelry, her hair pulled back neatly. She wasn't crying, she wasn't angry, she wasn't pleading or defending herself. She was just standing there, quiet, still. To Adam, that silence confirmed everything he already believed about her. Emily had always been like this, reserved, unremarkable, easy to overlook. She had never demanded attention or taken up space. And now, as their marriage ended, she wasn't even trying to fight. The judge entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. When they sat again, he adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file in front of him. His voice was steady, professional, detached. "Mr. Collins," the judge said, "you understand the terms of this divorce agreement?" Adam answered immediately, "Yes, Your Honor. Completely." There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt, no sadness. If anything, there was relief. The judge nodded and turned his attention to Emily. "Mrs. Collins." Emily lifted her head slightly. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable. "Yes, Your Honor." Adam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He glanced at her briefly, then looked away, as if she no longer required his attention. In his mind, this was already over. The discussion soon turned to assets. Adam cleared his throat and spoke again, his tone confident, almost dismissive. "There are no shared assets to divide. Everything of value was acquired through my income. My wife doesn't own anything substantial." The words lingered in the air. A few people in the courtroom shifted in their seats. Someone near the back exchanged a glance with another observer, but Adam didn't notice or didn't care. To him, he was simply stating facts. The judge looked at Emily once more. "Do you contest this statement?" Emily paused, just long enough for the silence to become noticeable. Then she said calmly, "No, Your Honor." Adam almost laughed. He shook his head slightly, amused by how predictable the situation had become. In his mind, Emily's agreement only proved what he had always believed. That she knew her place, but that she understood she had nothing to stand on. He picked up the pen, but before signing, he stopped. Slowly, deliberately. He looked up at her. "No hard feelings," he said casually, his tone polite on the surface but sharp underneath. "This is probably for the best. You'll manage, you always do." It wasn't concern, it wasn't kindness, it was condescension. Emily didn't respond. She didn't react. She didn't even look hurt. She simply nodded once. Adam signed the papers. The pen scratched across the page, slow and deliberate. One signature. Then another. He completed the process with the same indifference he might have shown signing a receipt. When he finished, he slid the documents forward, a satisfied smile still on his face. In that moment, Adam believed he had closed a chapter. He believed he had walked away clean. Untouched, unburdened. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that he had just signed away something far greater than a marriage. The judge accepted the papers and began reviewing them carefully, page by page. Line by line. Adam leaned back again, stretching slightly, already planning the rest of his day. Lunch with colleagues, maybe drinks later. He imagined telling the story with humor, "Bah, she didn't even fight," he would say. "Bah, didn't ask for a thing." To him, that was proof of his superiority. Emily remained standing, composed and patient. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't relieved. It was almost as if she were waiting, not for the divorce to end, but for something else to begin. The atmosphere in the courtroom subtly shifted. Nothing dramatic, no raised voices, just a quiet tension creeping in, like pressure before a storm. The judge paused. Adam noticed it, but dismissed it. Judges paused all the time. Procedures, formalities. He had no idea that the next moments would dismantle everything he believed about his wife, about himself, and about the reality he thought he controlled. To Adam Collins, this was the end of a forgettable marriage. In truth, it was the beginning of a reckoning he was completely unprepared for. 7 years earlier, Adam Collins believed he was making a sensible choice. Emily wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room. She didn't command attention. She didn't dominate conversations, but she was calm, thoughtful, predictable, or so he thought. At the time, Adam's career was accelerating fast. Long hours, high pressure, endless competition. His life revolved around momentum. Emily fit into that life neatly because she didn't demand much from it. She didn't push for luxury trips. She didn't question his late nights. She didn't compete for attention. To Adam, that felt like peace. They met through mutual friends at a quiet dinner gathering, while others spoke loudly about promotions, investments, and future plans. Emily listened. When she did speak, it was measured, careful, never rushed. Adam liked that. He mistook her restraint for simplicity, her humility for a lack of depth. On their third date, Adam talked for nearly 2 hours straight about his ambitions, where he wanted to be in 5 years, the lifestyle he expected, the respect he believed he deserved. Emily listened without interrupting. At the end, she smiled softly and said, "That sounds important to you." Adam took that as support. He never thought to ask what mattered to her. When Adam proposed, it wasn't dramatic. It was confident, practical, almost strategic. Marriage felt like the next logical step. Emily said yes, without hesitation, not because she was swept away, but because she believed, perhaps naively, that Adam loved her for who she was, not what she could offer. In the early years, things worked. Adam was busy, often exhausted. Emily adapted. She managed the home. She supported him when deals fell through. She celebrated his promotions quietly. She never corrected him. When he assumed she relied on his income, she never mentioned the accounts she had never touched, the inheritance she had never claimed, the trust that quietly grew in her name, year after year. Over time, Adam's success stopped being something he achieved and became something he was. He started measuring everything and everyone by visible outcomes, titles, salary. Influence. Emily didn't fit into those categories. At company events, Adam noticed the difference. Other executive spouses wore designer clothes. They spoke fluently about business. They knew how to perform success. Emily didn't. She stayed polite, reserved, comfortable in the background. Adam began to feel that she made him look smaller. At first, he didn't say it directly. It came out as suggestions. "You could do more. Have you thought about doing something bigger? Don't you want to be more than this?" Each comment carried an assumption that she was behind him, dependent on him, fortunate to be there. Emily heard every word. She absorbed them quietly. She tried explaining once that value wasn't always loud, that ambition didn't always need an audience. Adam brushed it off. To him, that sounded like excuses. The arguments grew sharper. Adam complained that he carried all the weight, that he was the only one contributing, that Emily didn't understand his world. He never asked why she chose a simpler life. He never considered that it might be intentional. When things reached their lowest point, it wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was exhaustion, a slow erosion of respect. One night, during an argument about something trivial, Adam said it casually. "Maybe we should just end this." Emily went silent. That silence, once comforting to him, now irritated him. He interpreted it as weakness. He mistook her lack of resistance for lack of power. From that moment on, Bar Adam rewrote their history. He convinced himself that he had outgrown her, that she had benefited from him more than he had from her. Bar ending the marriage felt not only justified but necessary. Emily didn't beg. She didn't argue. She asked only one question. Are you sure? Adam answered without hesitation. Yeah, the legal process moved quickly. Adam's lawyers were confident, efficient. To them, it was a straightforward case. A high-earning husband. A wife with no visible assets. No complications. Emily's attorney asked very little. He reviewed documents. Made notes. Said almost nothing. Adam found that amusing. He took it as confirmation that there was nothing to uncover. What Adam never noticed was how carefully Emily read every document. How she asked specific questions about wording, about finality. About decisions that couldn't be undone. Not once did she mention money. Not once did she hint at what she was walking away from. To Adam, the imbalance felt satisfying. It reinforced his belief that he was in control. That he had leverage. That he was the one walking away clean. But beneath that surface story, another truth existed. Emily wasn't avoiding conflict because she was powerless. She was choosing timing. She wasn't losing anything in that courtroom. She had already decided what she valued. And it wasn't something the law could divide. By the time the hearing arrived, Adam felt victorious. Emily felt resolved. The Y walked into the same courtroom, carrying entirely different realities, shaped by entirely different assumptions. Adam believed he was closing a chapter where he had given more than he received. Emily knew she was closing a door that no longer needed to be open, and neither of them, especially Adam, fully understood what would happen when those two realities finally collided. The divorce proceedings moved forward with an efficiency that only strengthened Adam's sense of control. Every procedural step felt predictable, every question felt routine. He answered calmly, clearly, without hesitation. To anyone watching, Adam Collins looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Emily, by contrast, said very little. She responded when spoken to. She never interrupted. She never corrected Adam's statements. That silence became a blank canvas. People filled it with assumptions. To Adam, it meant she had nothing to say because she had nothing to defend. When the judge asked about spousal support, Adam let out a short laugh before catching himself. Your Honor, he said, I don't believe that will be necessary. My wife never expressed interest in financial independence, and I've supported her generously throughout the marriage. The word generously hung in the air. Emily's attorney didn't object. He simply nodded once. That single nod emboldened Adam even more. He straightened slightly in his chair, his confidence growing, with each statement that went unshall. Lenged, there were a few observers in the room, law clerks, a court reporter, people waiting for their own cases. They watched quietly. Some felt sympathy for Emily. Others barely noticed her. Adam noticed everything. He noticed how eyes followed him when he spoke, how people nodded unconsciously, aligning themselves with his authority. He noticed how Emily seemed to fade into the background, her presence so understated it was almost invisible, that pleased him more than he cared to admit. At one point, the judge turned to Emily again. Mrs. Collins, he asked, do you wish to make any statement before these proceedings conclude? Emily paused. The pause stretched just long enough for Adam to glance at her. His eyebrows lifted slightly. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. He expected nothing. Maybe a brief sentence, maybe gratitude, maybe resignation. Instead, Emily spoke quietly. No, Your Honor, I have nothing to add. Adam exhaled through his nose, amused. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered, Told you. His attorney didn't respond. He was focused on the documents, turning pages carefully. Adam found that unnecessary. The case was already won. As the judge reviewed the final paperwork, Adam's thoughts drifted. He imagined how clean this would look in hindsight, how decisive he had been, how neatly he had cut ties. In his mind, he was the rational one, the provider, the one who had carried the marriage. He glanced at Emily. Again. She stood exactly where she had been since the beginning. Same posture, same calm expression. But something about it irritated him now. Not because she was emotional, because she wasn't. He had expected regret, some visible sign that this meant more to her than she let on. That absence unsettled him, though he refused to acknowledge it. The judge cleared his throat. Before I finalize this, he said, I want to confirm that both parties understand the implications of this agreement. Adam nodded immediately. Absolutely. Emily nodded as well. Adam couldn't help himself. He spoke again, his tone casual, almost playful. It's pretty straightforward, Your Honor. We're just two people moving on. Clean break. The judge studied him for a moment longer than necessary. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes lingered, as if measuring something beneath the surface. Adam mistook that look for routine scrutiny. Emily's attorney stood. With the court's permission, he said, we would like to submit one final item into the record. Adam's head turned sharply. One final item, he repeated, surprise slipping into his voice. The judge nodded. Go ahead. Emily's attorney walked forward and placed a sealed envelope on the judge's desk. It wasn't thick, it wasn't dramatic, but its presence shifted the energy in the room. Adam felt it before he understood it. What's that? Adam asked, half smiling, half annoyed. A clarification. The attorney rep lied calmly. Adam laughed. Clarification of what? She already said. She's not contesting anything. Emily remained silent. The judge opened the envelope and scanned the first page. His brow furrowed slightly. He turned the page, then another. The room grew quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, focused, heavy. Adam watched the judge closely. He noticed the change, the way the judge leaned back slightly, the way his fingers paused on the paper. Something crossed his face. Surprise. Concern. Adam felt a brief tightening in his chest. Is there a problem? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. The judge didn't answer. He continued reading. Emily's attorney returned to his seat. Without a word. Adam shifted in his chair. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He told himself it was nothing, a technical detail, a formality. But the way the judge looked up slowly, deliberately, suggested otherwise. Adam glanced at Emily again. She met his gaze briefly. Her expression hadn't changed, still calm, still unreadable. But there was something else now. Not triumph, not pity, certainty. And in that moment, Adam realized something that made his stomach drop. This wasn't Tava, not even close. The judge stared at the documents for several long seconds without speaking. This wasn't the casual pause of someone skimming routine paperwork. It was the kind of silence that suggested wait. Something serious had just landed on his desk. Adam tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thinner than before. Your Honor, he said, forcing a confident tone, is this really necessary? We already agreed on everything. The judge didn't respond. He set the papers down carefully, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at Emily's attorney. Counsel, the judge said, you are submitting verification of identity and beneficiary status. Yes, Your Honor, the attorney replied. His voice was calm, professional, almost detached. Adam blinked. Beneficiary status? He repeated under his breath. The words didn't make sense to him. They didn't belong in this room. Not here, not now. The judge turned his gaze to Emily. "Mrs. Collins," he asked, "is the information in these documents accurate?" Emily didn't hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor." Something in Adam's expression flickered. Annoyance. Confusion. "Can someone explain what's happening?" Adam asked, turning toward his attorney. He expected a quick answer, a dismissal, an end to whatever this was, but his attorney wasn't smiling. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the judge's desk. The judge took a slow breath and spoke in a measured tone, as if choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Collins," he said, "it appears there is significant information regarding your spouse's legal and financial standing that has not previously been addressed in these proceedings." Adam scoffed. "My wife's financial star." "Ding," he said incredulously, glancing at Emily. "She doesn't have one." Emily said nothing. The judge continued. "These documents indicate that Mrs. Collins is the sole beneficiary of an entity known as the Hawthorne Real Estate Trust." The name meant nothing to Adam. He shrugged slightly, dismissive. "A trust," he said. "People have trusts." Emily's attorney stood again. "With the court's permission," he said, "the Hawthorne Trust is not a typical family trust." Adam laughed, louder this time, forcing it. "Are we seriously doing this right now?" But no one laughed with him. The court reporter's hands slowed. One of the clerks stopped moving altogether. Even Adam's own attorney looked uneasy. The judge lifted the top page, read silently for a moment, then looked up. "Mr. Collins," he said, "these filings place the estimated valuation of the Hawthorne Real Estate Trust at approximately $1.3 billion. For a moment, Adam didn't react. Not because he was calm, but because his mind couldn't process the number. It didn't fit. It didn't belong to reality. He blinked, once, twice, then he laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's not real," he said. "That has to be a mistake." The judge's expression didn't change. "It is not a mistake." Adam turned to his attorney, his voice rising. "Tell him that's wrong." His attorney swallowed. "I don't think it is," he said quietly. The word "think" hit Adam harder than the number itself. High. S. attorney wasn't denying it. He was hesitating. Adam's chest tightened. He turned back to Emily, his voice dropping instinctively, as if the room had suddenly become private. "Emily," he said, "what is this?" Emily met his gaze. Her eyes were calm, no anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. "It's true," she said. Adam shook his head. "No," he muttered. "No, that can't be." "You're a teacher," he said louder now. "You drive that old car. You—" "I chose that life," Emily said evenly. The words landed cleanly. Adam's mouth opened, then closed. His face flushed. Anger, confusion, humiliation. He glanced around the room and realized something that made it worse. People were watching him differently now. Not with admiration, not with sympathy. They were watching him, like someone watching a mistake unravel. The judge spoke again, his voice steady but firm. "Mr. Collins, this disclosure changes the context of the agreement. You have just signed." Adam snapped back, desperate. "How?" He said. "The papers are the papers." She said she wasn't claiming anything. Emily's attorney nodded. "That's correct," he said calmly. "She is not claiming anything. She is simply ensuring the court understands that she is not financially dependent and requires no support." Adam stared at him. "So she's rich," he said slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it absurd again, "and she's just fine, walking away." No one answered. They didn't need to. The truth was already sitting on the judge's desk. Adam looked back at Emily, his voice cracking despite his effort. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily's response was simple. "You never asked." The courtroom felt smaller suddenly, Not because the walls moved, but because Adam did, and, in that moment, he understood something far worse than the number itself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mirror, and he didn't like what it was showing him. Adam felt the room closing in on him. Not physically, but socially, psychologically. He turned sharply toward the judge, as if authority itself might still save him. "Your Honor," he said quickly, "I didn't have this information. This changes everything. I'd like to revisit the agreement." The words came out rushed, uneven. For the first time that day, Adam Collins didn't sound certain. The judge's gaze hardened. "Mr. Collins," he said, "you signed this agreement voluntarily, under oath, confirming that you understood its terms and consequences." Adam shook his head. "But she hid this," he said, gesturing toward Emily. "That's fraud." Emily's attorney stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "Mrs. Collins did not misrepresent herself at any point during these proceedings." Adam scoffed. "She let me believe." The attorney continued, uninterrupted. "She did not claim poverty. She did not request support. She did not assert dependence. She simply did not disclose private family matters that were irrelevant to the outcome being Sue." Adam's jaw tightened. "That's convenient," he muttered. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Collins," the judge said firmly, "the court does not require spouses to volunteer information they are not asked for, particularly when no claim is being made." Adam felt heat rise up his neck. "So that's it," he snapped. "She walks away with everything, and You walk away," the judge corrected, "with exactly what you agreed to." Silence followed. Not the earlier confident silence. This one was heavy, final. The judge looked down once more, then brought the gavel down. "This divorce is finalized." The sound echoed sharply, louder than Adam expected. Emily didn't react. No smile, no satisfaction. She simply turned slightly, as if preparing to leave. Adam stood abruptly. "Emily," he said, his voice too loud, too urgent. "Wait." She stopped. Just for a moment. She didn't turn around. "We need to talk," Adam said. "There's a lot we need to—" "We already did," Emily replied quietly. Her words were steady. "For 7 years," she continued, "you just never listened." Then she walked away. Adam remained standing, staring at the space she had just occupied. The courtroom resumed its rhythm. Lawyers whispered. Clerks shuffled papers. Another case was called. Life moved on. But Adam didn't. His attorney touched his arm lightly. "We should go," he said. Adam nodded slowly, as if waking from something. As he walked out of the courtroom, he felt eyes on him. Not impressed, not respectful, curious, judging. Outside, the hallway felt too bright, too loud. Adam loosened his tie, suddenly short of breath. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from a colleague. "Are you okay?" He didn't reply. For the first time in years, Adam Collins had nothing to say. He leaned against the wall, palms flat against the cold surface. His thoughts raced, replaying words, moments, assumptions. "You never asked." The sentence repeated in his head, over and over. Emily hadn't deceived him. She hadn't tricked him. She had simply let him speak. Let him assume. Let him reveal who he really was. And that realization settled in slowly, uncomfortably. Adam hadn't been outplayed by strategy. He had been undone by his own certainty. For years, he had believed control came from confidence, from speaking louder, from being seen. But in that courtroom, he learned something he had never considered. The most dangerous assumptions are the ones you never question. And as Adam walked away, the weight he felt wasn't loss. It was exposure. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly. At first, it was small things. A colleague sent a message, asking if Adam was okay. Another made a joke that didn't quite land. Someone forwarded an article about high-profile divorces, no names mentioned, but the implication was obvious. Aus, Adam told himself. People would move on, they always did. But the story moved faster than he could control. Friends he hadn't heard from in months suddenly wanted to check in. Former co-workers asked oddly specific questions about trusts, real estate holdings, inheritance structures. At work, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations paused. When Adam entered rooms, meetings felt colder. A senior partner pulled him aside one afternoon. "We're getting some attention," he said carefully. "Nothing official. Just be aware." Aware of what? Adam wanted to ask. Aware that his judgment, once trusted, was now questionable. Aware that confidence, when exposed, could look like arrogance. Adam began replaying years of moments he had dismissed, comments he had made casually, assumptions he had never examined. He remembered how Emily listened, not passively, patiently. He remembered how she never interrupted when he talked about himself. What he had once seen as emptiness now revealed itself as restraint. Meanwhile, Emily disappeared. No statements, no interviews, no public explanations. That silence, once ignored, now became part of the story. People admired it. They called it dignified, controlled, classy. Adam couldn't escape his own reactions. Every explanation sounded defensive. Every justification made him look worse. So he stopped explaining. He stopped answering calls. He avoided social events. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, not thinking about money, thinking about moments, the way he had spoken to her, the way he had dismissed her, the way he had assumed his voice mattered more. One evening, alone in his apartment, Adam poured himself a drink he didn't really want. He scrolled through old photos, vacations he barely remembered, dinners he had considered unimportant. Emily was always there, slightly in the background, smiling softly, never demanding attention. He stopped on one photo, Emily looking at him, not at the camera, listening. The memory burned. For the first time, Adam felt regret. Not for money. He had never had access to it, but for something harder to name. For mistaking silence, for absence, for confusing power with volume, for believing that visibility equaled value. He typed a message to Emily, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Nothing he wrote sounded like accountability. It all sounded like guilt, looking for relief. So he sent nothing. And in that silence, Adam learned something Emily had known all along. Some apologies are about easing guilt, not honoring boundaries. Days turned into weeks. Adam's career stabilized, but it didn't recover. He still worked. He still showed up. But something had shifted. He spoke less, listened more. People assumed he had matured. They didn't know what it had cost. The lesson stayed with him, not loudly, permanently, because the courtroom hadn't exposed Emily's secret. It had exposed his character. Emily returned to the life she had always chosen, not the life people imagined. When they heard numbers, they couldn't comprehend. There were no headlines, no public statements, no sudden displays of wealth. She went back to her classroom. She graded papers. She attended meetings. She smiled politely at colleagues who had no idea what her last name meant in rooms they would never enter. The Hawthorne real estate empire remained where it had always been, behind layers of trusts, holding companies, quiet boardrooms where power didn't announce itself. Emily treated it the same way. She always had, as background. Her father had taught her that real control came from being underestimated, that the loudest person in the room was rarely the one with actual power. Growing up around immense wealth had taught her restraint. Money, when visible, changed people. When invisible, it offered freedom. Emily chose freedom. She dressed simply because it protected her. She lived modestly because it filtered intentions. She never volunteered information that would distort relationships. Not because she was hiding, because she was choosing who got access. There were moments, early in her marriage, when she had considered telling Adam, not to impress him, not to equalize power, but to be known, each time. She hesitated, not out of fear, but instinct. She sensed how the truth would reshape the dynamic, how it would become the loudest thing in the room. And she wanted to be loved without it. Adam never made space for that kind of honesty. He asked questions that assumed answers. He listened selectively. He measured worth in ways that excluded everything. Emily quietly provided. Eventually, she understood something painful. Even if she spoke, he wouldn't hear her. Not really. So when the marriage fractured, Emily felt sadness, but not shock. The distance between them had grown slowly, fed by assumptions, reinforced by silence that Adam misunderstood. The courtroom wasn't revenge. It wasn't exposure. It was accuracy. The court needed to know she wasn't dependent, that she didn't require protection or provision. That was all. She didn't reveal the truth to humiliate Adam. She revealed it because precision mattered. Adam experienced it as betrayal because it collapsed the story he had built about himself. Emily experienced it as closure. After the divorce, she made one change, not the kind people expect. No mansion, no jet, no announcement. She started a scholarship fund at her school. Quietly, it paid for lunches, books, after-school programs. No plaque, no recognition. She never put her name on it, because the point was never to be seen. Emily didn't disappear. She simply remained where she had always been, outside the noise, outside the hierarchy. Adam had built his identity on, and that was the difference between them. She knew who she was, with or without approval. Adam had built himself entirely on a P. Rance. That contrast was the real divide. Not money, not status. Awareness. Months after the hearing, Adam still heard the sound of the gavel. Not the noise itself, but what it represented. The moment the story he told himself collapsed. People moved on. The whispers faded. The jokes stopped. New scandals replaced old ones. But the silence that followed was worse. Without the noise, Adam was left alone, with the truth. The courtroom hadn't ruined his life. It had stripped away the illusion he lived inside. He tried to rebuild the narrative in a way that made him feel less exposed. At first, he told himself Emily had tricked him, that she had hidden the truth to make him look small, that he had been ambushed. But the more he replayed the timeline, the weaker that story became. Emily hadn't provoked him. She hadn't manipulated the situation. She had simply stood still while he spoke. Let him assume, let him define value on his own terms. And in doing so, he revealed himself. Realization forced Adam into a place he had avoided his entire life. Self-reflection. He thought about the early days, the way Emily listened while he talked about ambition. He had assumed admiration. Now he understood. It had been patience. He remembered how she suggested slower mornings, fewer late nights. He had dismissed those ideas as weakness. Now he saw them as wisdom. The phrase he had used in court returned to him. She doesn't own anything of value. The word S made his stomach turn, not because they were wrong on paper, but because of what they revealed. Adam had reduced a human being to a balance sheet. He had measured worth only by what could be displayed. Emily had been strong, in ways he didn't respect, because he didn't understand them. On the other side of the city, Emily continued her life unchanged. She taught, she helped, she lived quietly. Her wealth remained distant, managed, unobtrusive. It didn't rush in to compensate for loss. It didn't need to. Michael never contacted her again, not because he didn't want to, but because he finally understood that apologies offered too late were often about the person speaking, not the person receiving. As time passed, Adam's career recovered partially, not to the heights it once reached, but enough. He spoke with more caution now, listened more than he talked. People assumed growth. They didn't know the cost. The story, when told by others, always focused on the twist, the hidden fortune, the shocked husband. But that was never the real story. The truth was quieter. A man mistook confidence for insight, mistook visibility for value, mistook silence for weakness. Emily had never needed to prove her power. It had existed, long before the courtroom, and long after it. The reckoning hadn't been about money. It had been about perception, about how easily people dismiss what doesn't perform, about how often power goes unnoticed, because it doesn't announce it. Self. The courtroom hadn't revealed Emily's secret. It had revealed two philosophies of life, standing face to face. Only one of them was grounded in something that lasted. Emily walked away, unchanged. Adam stayed behind, with something he could never sign away, the knowledge that the most dangerous thing a person can do is underestimate silence, because the next time someone laughs at what they don't understand, they may not be facing weakness at all. They may be standing in front of power that simply hasn't introduced itself yet.